Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Rose Mina, and I'm your host for today's event, Family Reading Time, Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity in Children's Picture Books. This event is brought to you by the Los Angeles Technical College and the LACCD Black Faculty and Staff Association. The Black Faculty and Staff Association is a member of the National Organization, Association for the Study of African American Life and History, called ASWA. And it's ASALH, ASWA. And the local Los Angeles branch, our Authors Study Club. ASWA was established on September 9th, 1915, 1-5, by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month. For 95 years, ASWA has promoted the study of African American history and has provided the nation with a Black History Week and month theme. This year, the theme is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. In line with the theme, we are sitting down with Dr. Camille Geer-Rich, who will talk to us about points to consider when creating an anti-racist child library. Before she starts, I'm going to introduce myself very briefly because I believe many of you already know me. I am Dr. Rose Gafani Mina, and I chair the Business Civic Engagement Pathway at LATTC. Before that, I've been a faculty member in the child development discipline for the last 24 years. And worked with lots of children and families before that. So it is a real pleasure to be sitting down with Dr. Rich and to talk about this very important subject. Let me just introduce you quickly to Dr. Rich. Dr. Rich is Associate Provost of Diversity and Inclusion at USC, which is next door to us, and she's the founder and director of PRISM, the USC Initiative for the Study of Race, Gender, Sexuality, and the Law. She's also co-founder, she also co-founded the Diversity and Inclusion Awareness Week at USC, and is a co-founder of Wicked Problems Practicum, a cross-school program that invites students to create think tanks that partner with community and government agencies to collaborate on problems affecting the global megacities. Dr. Rich is widely known for her research on law, discrimination, and identity formation issues related to race, class, gender, and sexuality. Her research and teaching interests include constitutional law, feminist legal theory, family law, children and the law, and the First Amendment. Dr. Rich graduated with honors from Brown University in 1993 and from Yale Law School in 1998. Please help me welcoming Dr. Camille Geer-Rich. Yay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rose, for that very, very nice introduction and a thorough one. I had to say, wow, I've been doing this kind of a long time, given all those things that you mentioned. But I'm so excited to talk to you today about children's literature and using literature as a conduit to build healthy self-esteem, specifically in racial identity development, as well as an anti-racist approach to the world. Sitting down with a child to read a picture book is kind of one of those special intimate moments. Some of us have those special moments from childhood when we enjoyed those picture books with our parents. And using those moments as an opportunity to actively teach them things about the world is a really special time, and one that often causes adults to really sit back and think and reflect even on their perspective on the world, because sometimes the poetry and lyricism of children's books is just the right place to sort of wrestle some of those contentious and challenging issues. So thank you again for having me. Thank you to Dr. Randall for reaching out. She saw me give a presentation on anti-racist children's literature in another context, And once we got our heads together with Dr. Rose, we started thinking more specifically about anti-Blackness and how to combat that particular problem by using children's literature to broaden children's perspectives. And so that's how we ended up here today. So there's a lot to cover. I'm eager to get started. And I wanted to give you a preview of how you can stay involved in the presentation while I'm talking in the early stages. So Dr. Rose is going to be watching the chat and pulling in comments from the chat so that I can engage with you during the presentation. Also, we have a couple of polls ready for you. So we're going to ask you to weigh in with your perspective periodically throughout. And then we'll come to a break point and we'll have an opportunity to just have a more general and relaxed conversation, including getting some insights from Dr. Rose about her thoughts about the presentation to end us off. Okay, so with no further ado, I'm going to share a slide presentation with you, which will really allow you to see some of the books that I'm talking about and get a sense about why I think they're valuable to children. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see the slide presentation? Is our technology working for us? Perfect. All right, so the title of the presentation is Talking to Your Children About Race, Children's Literature as a Path Out of Anti-Blackness. And again, I want to thank the Los Angeles Trade and Technical College for inviting me here today for the Black History Month celebration and family reading time. We've already had such a nice introduction for me. I'm not going to go into all these details. It's actually not that interesting. But I've written for a number of different journals about the social construction of race and the ways in which we, in various places and locations, we're primed to answer questions about our racial identity. That causes us to be oriented towards particular places in particular ways. When your child goes to school and checks off a box on a form about what his or her racial identity is, it's a moment that causes them to reflect on race, to reflect on the race of their peers, to reflect on the things that they've learned at home about race. And you want them to be ready for that moment. You want them to feel empowered and centered and confident. And some of the books we're going to examine today will allow them to sort of enter into those moments when race is raised for them, whether by peers or by forms or by teachers or any number of things, but to come to those moments with a sense of confidence and a sense of history as well. Okay, so we're going to start off, I thought we'd start off with one of our poll questions to really get people involved. So when you're thinking about raising a healthy child of color, how early is too early to talk about race? Okay, as we get our poll going, and I think Dr. Randall's going to be running our polls for us, some of the questions that may pop into your minds as you think about what age is, what is the information I need to share? What do I need to avoid? What am I worried about? And thinking about when to bring up the topic of race. And also, how do I talk about race in ways that doesn't make a child feel like their dreams are in any way constrained or limited by racial identity or race discrimination in society? How do I talk about these issues? So what do you think? Feel free to register your vote. What's the best age to introduce the topic of race? Choice one is as early as the child in question can read. As soon as they can read, you bring it up. 3 to 5 years old, maybe go with an age range instead. 6 to 9 years old, or maybe wait a little bit later until they're about 10 to 12 years old. Okay. And while we're waiting for the votes to come in, Dr. Rose, do you have any, what have you heard people share with you about this topic?
Well, I have heard about 6-year-olds. Some of the research is saying at 6 years old, it's important to talk about skin color, race and culture and respect. Children are often said to be colorblind, and this is the context that people are looking through that, don't teach them, children under the age of 5 are colorblind, but that is not true. What we're finding in the classrooms is that children do talk about race and they do talk about the color of the skin. One little boy told a little girl that she was dirty because she had a brown skin. And I remember asking why, I asked the teacher what her response was. And she said she had to sit them both down and talk about the different skin color because there was nothing Amanda could do to, get undirty or whatever his word was. So it's not as early as the children are able to talk about these kind of things. They may be little and say somebody's dirty or I don't like you. and we really have to take a further step and investigate this.
Okay, great. And do we have our poll results in? Did the
We
poll
do.
results? Okay,
Yes,
so let's take a
and
look.
we want to share the results. So I'm just going to put the results up for you. And what we have found, everybody, for this one question is people feel that the best age to talk about race is 3 to 5 year olds. And that won out. But you can see the dominant is as early as a child in question can read, and 3 to 5 year olds. So that's pretty much over half of the people saying this, like almost 70.
Okay, and that's great. As you mentioned, it does match up with our understanding of the research that children as early as 6 months are starting to track people by skin color, that they're starting to develop some sort of abstract conception of race even before, right, they're speaking and talking and communicating to us about race. Once they enter into the space of language, when they can talk about these issues and they can hear other people talk and understand, they start to form what we call racial understandings. By the time they're in that 3 to 5 years old age, they're starting to use racial heuristics or racial rules for categorizing people and understanding relationships. And one of the surprising things that happens for parents is the child may be developing racial understandings that don't actually match your own. So you may be communicating all the right and positive messages about race, but your child may be picking up things from surrounding culture, atmosphere, background, that stray or random comment that a friend makes when they come by. So even though you think that you are providing the absolute right and positive message for your child, you need to be aware that there are going to be these other messages coming in. And so you need to be actively involved in the process of continuing to engage with your child and discovering those moments where they have racial understandings that seem misguided or ill-informed or based on stereotypes. One of the other interesting things about the research in this area is we know that they're starting to use race to distinguish between people and categorize things between 3 and 5. What we found is by the time they get to that 7 or 9 year old age, so for the people who in our poll who thought maybe wait a little longer, when they get to that 7 or 9 year old age, they've learned to actually lie. They've learned to lie about the fact that they're using race. So if you ask a child, are you discriminating against so-and-so? Or are you treating so-and-so badly because of race? The child will say, oh no, it's something else, right? Because they learned from us that it's not appropriate to talk about race in that way. And so even though your child may be saying to you that they're not using race, you need to remain conscious of the ways in which the racial atmosphere around them is shaping their understandings. Okay. As we go through the presentation today, I'll be talking a lot about, that intimate private time that you're spending with your child, reading picture books, having these conversations about foundational concepts, about the particulars of race. But I wanted to take a moment and also pause because we need to come to this subject with our whole being and our whole selves. And many of us are coming from families that sometimes don't look exactly like the nuclear family that's presented in a storybook. So I wanted to also include in this conversation our queer families, our same-sex families, our gender fluid families. I'll be talking about issues that relate to how gender identity and sexual orientation relate to understandings of race. I'll be talking about children in mixed race homes, whether that's because of adoption or cross-racial marriages. And I'll also be talking about intergenerational families. That is, a lot of our families involve grandparents who are required to provide care for children and do so gladly. But it's just to say that as we start out, no one should feel like they're on the margins of this discussion. The Black family is a capacious concept. There are many, many different types of families in that category. And so we need to recognize all of them as we talk about the topic of race. Because again, if we're talking about the intersections, about the ways in which things combine, sometimes these issues will resonate in particular ways, depending on what your family looks like. So we went through our first question. I love this picture of this little girl reading her book. Now, if you're thinking about talking to your child in the early years about race, you might be looking for resources that'll help you in that conversation. And luckily, there are a number of really great resources out there. One of my favorite books is Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi. And some of you know his book for adults, right? How to Be Anti-Racist. It's become, a must-have on bookshelves across the country and family bookshelves across the country. But he really breaks down some of the basic concepts in Anti-Racist Baby in a way that you can talk about them with really young children. I like this particular page because it really goes after this idea of colorblindness. So often our children are told you need to be colorblind in order to be fair. And as Dr. Rose has said, they're not acting in a colorblind way. And actually research shows in later years that most people of color, when they hear messages about colorblindness, they actually suspect that the people around them are motivated by race and are just not conscious of it. And so they grow mistrustful of people who talk about colorblindness in this way, because they know it is extremely hard, if not impossible, to actually live one's life in a colorblind fashion. Also, it's not a world most of us would want to live in, right? Race is so important to us in terms of political issues and cultural events. It becomes a pretty sterile world when you try to reach for colorblindness. Dr. Rose, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to ask the polling question too, which is about skin color, because children do talk about the skin color as we originally said. So I'm going to launch the polling while you can go ahead with your next point, and I'll let you know when the results come in.
Okay, great. As you're thinking about how to talk to your child about racism, you also want to step beyond just talking about prejudice as an individual matter, and you want to get into questions about social justice and how race plays a role there as well. So A is for Activist is a book that talks about political movements and what it means to be an activist person and interested in progressive causes. And then as they get a little bit older, there's a book called The Cycle of a Dream, which actually introduces children from between the ages of 3 and 7 to the concept of structural racism. That is how race ends up affecting people's resources available to them, the shape of their communities, and is really embedded in institutions. I'm particularly proud of this book, trying to take on this topic at such a young age. I think it's going to be an important intervention in literature and a must-have on bookshelves as well.
Can I just say something real quick for the people who are in the poll? Please, make sure you're polling so we can get your answers. It's kind of fun to know what people are thinking in the group. And it also supports what Dr. Rich is showing and showing us in her presentation. Okay, and we do have a comment that says, one comment, I personally don't have children, but I've witnessed children teasing another child due to their race. Thank you, Brianna. That is very helpful. And yeah, we do know of people being teased. So let me just share those results. I'm ending the polling. We have about 16 people who answered out of 23. So here are the results, everybody. We see that 56% of the people said yes, and then there's some people who said no. They have not, their child has never been teased or, about another skin color. So has your child been teased or teased another about skin color? 44 people said no. So it's kind of like a half and half, more or less, but we do know that half of the children are being seen for their color and being teased for it.
Okay.
So
and
thank you.
Sure, and thank you for the results. Another interesting thing to think about is that for those 44% of you who said, well, no, my child hasn't been or been teased on account of skin color, it is again worth thinking about whether or not they're being completely transparent with you about their experiences. I know myself, when I talked to my daughter about skin color teasing, the initial questions about it, she said she couldn't think of anything. And then as she thought about it a little bit more, she did remember people who maybe were pushed to the side on the playground, or someone who had said to her, your skin doesn't look clean, you should brush that off. And she had almost blocked those things out or didn't want to talk about them. Sometimes children won't share things with us because they're worried about upsetting us, especially when we worked so hard to maybe ensure that they get a good education, or we're playing a role in their school in order to try to make it a more progressive and safe space for them. They almost want to protect us from some of the bad things that are happening. And so it's worth considering, again, if your child says that this isn't going on, some additional questioning, and also staying open to the possibility that it may pop up on the radar screen for them later on, and you want to be ready for that. I provided you with 3 different books to think through these issues, and they do really different things. So even though there are a lot of titles out there, what I was hoping that I would provide you with are some general guidelines or ideas to think about as you're sort of sorting through the various choices, whether it's on Amazon or online somewhere or in a bookstore. So The Skin You Live In is a great book for just introducing children to a host of beautiful, beautiful poetic ways to talk about differences in skin color. There are honey-colored children and coffee-colored children and toffee-colored children. And every shade of the rainbow is represented as delicious and wonderful and good. That's a wonderful book, especially if you're in a family with a range of skin colors or a mixed race family, a Latinx family. Sometimes African-American families have a broad range of skin colors as well. Again, a great book for sort of thinking about the broad range of beautiful skin colors. If Dominican were a color, is also starting to get into the issue of preferences based on skin color and some of the subtle hierarchies that are set up based on skin color. So that's a great book for engaging with that issue, as well as talking about some of the issues around hair texture. So hair texture is going to be our next topic as well. But If Dominican Was a Color really emphasizes the ways in which, as a nation, as a culture, Dominicans are united, and that these differences in skin color or hair texture are not reasons to prefer one group over the other, but really we're united as a family. Solway actually deals with the same issue, but in the context of the African-American or African experience. So it talks about a very dark-skinned young girl who has a very light-skinned family member and finds that that light-skinned family member, even in a Black context, is being preferred. And so the question for her throughout the story is, why was I born this way and why do people treat me so badly? She's even called names on the playground. But the story turns into a myth about two beautiful Black sisters, one who is the color of night and one is the color of the golden sun, and their deep and abiding love for one another. And I won't get the plot completely, but basically the people who love day learn that they can't live without the night. They learn about the night's incredible beauty. They learn that the night is central to their existence and that that deep, beautiful darkness is what makes the stars shine. And so the little girl is left at the end of the book with a conception of herself that really shows that darkness is not just about creating space for light, but it allows things to shimmer and glisten in a completely different way that's associated with darkness. It's a really beautiful book.
Dr. Rich, I know you were going to talk about good and bad hair. Is that coming up on the second slide?
Sure, just a couple of shots from the book. So again, in here, her sister was the color of high noon. Her mother was the color of dawn. Baba was the color of dusk. And you can see the kids on the playground teasing her. And now we're at hair. Okay, so we can ask our poll question. Do you want to go ahead, Dr. Rose?
Yes, there are already 16 people who answered. As soon as you talked about hair in the first of the slide before this one, I put out the poll. But I just would like you to explain the hair from the slide. Finishing up.
Sure. So again, hair is another touch point that is a common one where children get teased, particularly in mixed race environments, but certainly even in more homogenous environments. There is a conception of good versus bad hair. Did the poll results come in? I'm just curious to see.
Yeah, they're coming in. We have a few people. I'm giving them a bit of time to vote. And so did you want to talk? Do you want to finish this or can I share the results?
Oh, sure. You can share them whenever.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right. So we have the results. I'm going to end the polling. We have 18 out of 24 people who voted. And I'm going to share the results real quick. And you can see 67% of the people did talk about good hair versus bad hair. And then nobody talked about it is 33%. So the majority are talking about this good hair. You have the good hair. Oh, you have the bad hair. That conversation.
Right.
So.
And certainly the natural hair movement in African-American communities and Black communities has changed the conversation a lot, where there are lots of people who are very interested in styles and products and really longer conversations about how to care for and respect natural Black hair, exploring hairstyles. And I think even some of the newer sort of avant-garde styles that involve like dyeing your locks purple or green, right, has introduced some of these issues to children in a way that makes them more colorful and more exciting for them. Hair Love is a really charming book. It was actually turned into a cartoon. Some of you may be aware of it, in which a little girl is basically negotiating with her father to get the hairstyle that she wants. And so one of the nice things about the book is it's honest that natural hair needs to be respected, that it takes time to style. And it's important in these conversations to be truthful with children about challenges or about issues that they're experiencing. So even in the context of the books about skin color, one of the things I wanted to emphasize is you do need to be truthful with your child about, right, the teasing that may happen with regard to hair, about the teasing that may happen with regard to skin color, because that pain that children are experiencing is quite fundamental and quite real. Even when you talk to adults later on, they remember back to moments when they were teased as children, and those things are still with them. So honestly, engaging with that through literature and talking with children about their pain can be really, really helpful in building the bonds of trust, as well as building their confidence and self-esteem on these issues. So the little girl is negotiating with her father because he does think it takes a long time to do her hair, and he's not that good at it at the beginning. But with a little patience and a little determination, he does get her the hairstyle that she wants. Another nice thing about this book is there's a reason that the little girl is turning to her father for hairstyling. Okay, so here we have some images from the book, both images that stress the beauty and the really feeling of majesty she has when her hair is done appropriately, and the love her father feels for her even as he is struggling with trying to get her hair done the proper way.
I think it's a great, book because it doesn't foster the stereotype that only, the mothers do the hair, but we see the father also doing the hair, especially in the Black culture. So this was really good. I remember my father doing my hair, and I felt odd about it because, it's usually the women that do the hair, not the men. So it's a great book.
It's great. And one of the other things too is, so her mom is not there doing her hair because her mother is recovering from cancer and she's in the hospital. And so it shows her father stepping up, right, to take on the responsibility. And you get the sense after this, at the end of the tale, that he's actually feeling really good about this. And this is something he's going to continue to do, which is quite nice as well, is to think about gender roles. And as you mentioned, right, who's doing this work and making it natural and normal, that a father would, of course, do his daughter's hair. Another issue that may come up for children that you might find help in children's literature and negotiating is, right, immigration status and accent. So the book Dreamers does a wonderful job of talking about the ways in which a young immigrant mother will dream for her child. And through a series of beautiful pictures, talks about their going to the library and accessing all sorts of opportunities, as well as the challenges that they face in trying to find space for themselves in American society. It's a really great book to help children talk about these issues. I think particularly during the last days of the Trump era, families were looking for material that presented a more heroic portrait and a portrait of immigrant families that accorded them the respect that they deserve. And Dreamers does a wonderful job of doing that. Island Born is a nice contrast title of a young girl who has always lived in the United States, but still maintains profound ties to her immigrant community, to her original community where her parents are from. And so in some ways, she's questioning what her right is to that legacy. And the children around her are questioning what her right is to that legacy. And she's trying to figure out what her feelings of pride are about and how she can express them in a way that feels authentic and true. So she resolves this by the end of the book, but it's a wonderful exploration of what it means to, right, be a hyphenated American in some way, and to maintain that identity as a living, growing identity. So this is another story about the Latinx/Black community. And we can find more and more of these titles that allow people to really acknowledge themselves in their full complexity.
So this is really wonderful, Dr. Rich, that you have brought these books to our attention. Some people are asking whether we have a book list, and I've given them Aisha's email so that she can get the list to them. Because people, the whole idea of having this workshop is so that we can have a library of books that really help children understand their race and diversity issues. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. I don't know how much we want to share before we go on to, how much time do we have left?
We have quite a bit of time, actually. We're at 4:36, believe it or not. And I have the next question that says, age to introduce transgender identity, which is part of the slides, the slide we're on.
Okay, so
So, yeah.
go ahead and start that conversation, because that's an
Okay.
important question for people is, what's the right age to start the conversation about transgender identity? And Dr. Rose, do you want to share some of your insights about your experiences or what you've heard from parents or from peers about this particular issue?
I would give this opportunity to wait, just so that people have a context. Transgender, as you know, in my country, from Kenya, is a big issue. It's just becoming, awareness of it. It's been hidden underneath. And even in America today, I do have some of my students that tell me that they do suffer being transgender. I've had some students come into my classroom and talk about it. I've also had little children that tell me they're a girl and not a boy, when their sex is definitely a female, but they're telling me they're a boy, or vice versa. And the need to respect that, and teaching the students that, that are preparing to be teachers, that it's important to let the child have the identity they want to have. But then some of my students always come back in the debate. It's like their parents are pushing them. They don't know this. So, that's the kind of thing that's happening in the classroom, and we wanting to teach the pre-service teachers acceptance of children's points of views and the families they come from, and those people who are influencing them at that early age.
Okay, great. Is our polling? Because I'll go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, the poll, we have 19 out of 25 people. We're going to end the polling. And it's, as everybody can see, you can see that these are very close. People are saying what's the best age as early as they can read, 3 to 5, 10 to 12 was the most popular, but you can see 3 to 5 is a close. I don't know why 6 to 9 was less, but once again, this is the results we got.
Okay, and aside from that little sort of fluke with 6 to 9, it seems a pretty even spread almost between the various categories. This is a little more challenging for people to sort of figure out when the right moment is to raise these issues. But the reality is that we're seeing younger and younger gender fluid or transgender children. One of the ways for people who are sort of, I don't know, they feel a little bit nervous about the concept of transgender is to understand the concept of gender fluidity has been with us all along. We just use different words to describe people who were gender fluid, who were pushing against, right, those boundaries of the gender category. Sometimes we describe them as tomboys, right, or tomgirls. We were always sort of looking at people who didn't quite fit squarely in the center of those categories and giving them names or describing them in ways. But often those names made them feel troubled about themselves, made them feel less secure. The language is now shifting to an acceptance to give people space to express gender quite broadly. And if you think about it in a continuum in that way, getting to the point about transgender seems much easier. It's allowing people to express the gender that they feel rather than being determined by, right, by their physicality, by their physical bodies. If we think about race as well, right, we're at a point where we don't tell people what race they are based on what they look like. We allow people to choose based on their background and history and what their family connections tell them. So racial fluidity is a lot more accepted and sort of front of mind for people. Gender identity is getting there as well. The things that transgender people feel are really a product of the society around them, the sort of slow evolution of attitudes around them, the nervousness and anxiety of people around them, because it's been far easier for us to sort of shove people into little categories and little boxes rather than really engage with them in all of their complexity. So this is one of the areas where when you're sitting down and sort of looking at these books with your child, it's an opportunity for you to continue to process, to get accustomed to the idea and to see some of the beauty of the world that's revealed by fully embracing this concept. So my recommendation is, right, early. Early is far better to introduce this concept, because when children get accustomed to these static, hard categories about who's in and who's out, they start using them in other areas as well. They grow resistant to seeing the world in its complexity. And many of them may be struggling with these issues, but if they're in a household where the lines are rigidly drawn, they are not going to feel comfortable coming to you. and they'll come to these realizations later on. And it can result in a profound depression, profound alienation. So you want to have those doors open.
We have a question, sir. We have a good question that perhaps you can answer, Dr. Rich, and I don't mind chiming in. It's what about the biracial cultures? This question comes from Gabriel Moreno. What about the biracial cultures? I had this issue growing up and feeling where I belong. Do you have any recommendations to help children feel more comfortable?
Sure. So some of our books involve mixed race families. I'm just gonna put a pin in that question just for a quick second to finish up this section on transgender, and we'll come back to the question about biracial identity. It's an incredibly important one, and it's one of the reasons why I was bringing in books that sort of with people with multiple identities to show that you don't have to choose and you don't have to be one. But an important question. I just want to make sure we finish up this little piece on transgender before we go to it. Julian as a mermaid attracted a lot of attention, both because the pictures in the book are extremely beautiful. And it's a wonderful story that allows us to combat racial stereotypes and also attend to multiple identities at once. So this is a little, I believe this little boy is Puerto Rican, but he's in an area that looks like New York City, and he's with his grandmother for the day, and he ends up, let's say he ends up with a sort of Gone with the Wind moment where he takes the curtains and turns them into an outfit. Okay, and because of certain stereotypes about Latinx communities and conservatism of older adults about gender fluidity, the reader of the book who's an adult may have a moment where they sort of worry that Julian is going to be punished for taking down the drapes. Instead, his grandmother's thrilled, and she's ready to dress up and she's ready to go to the parade with him. And so it's a wonderful moment where gender fluidity and a little boy's desire for the feminine is not pathologized. It's welcomed in the family, and she celebrates it with her own pageantry. She gets dressed up and they go out together. So again, a great book for multiple identities at once. He's gender fluid, he is Latinx, and he's also Black, right? And it gives you an opportunity to the point raised by your friend who raised the question, right? To talk about multiple identities. He doesn't have to choose between being Black or being Latinx. He's both at the same time. And it's fully welcomed and fully understood and not problematized. It's not a tragedy. It's not a story about him wrestling with that identity and trying to find a place. There are lots of titles that are about sort of people who are biracial and trying to find their space between two communities. But one of the things I'll emphasize to you at the end of the presentation is you want to present your children with enough books where the world does not problematize their identity. The world treats them as something beyond that identity, because it allows them, again, to imagine a world where we get beyond some of the discrimination that has limited us in the past. Now, Julian is gender fluid. I wanted to emphasize gender fluid versus transgender. Okay, so Aiden, when Aiden became a brother, is a book about a transgender child who has fully opted into, right, another gender. And for some people, even my description that way is offensive because for Aiden, it's not a choice. Right? Aiden feels this deep within themselves, and it's not about choosing. But what I like about the book is it clearly establishes that Aiden, right, has chosen this particular gender presentation for himself in the family, for themselves in the family, and his family is fully accepting. The entire story is about the arrival of a brother in the family and what it means for Aiden to be faced with a scenario in which another child may be trapped in a rigid gender category. So Aiden, this child won't feel comfortable with, and aiding on their experience growing up and the feeling of constraint and hoping for more for this sibling. So I think it's beautiful in that it doesn't problematize Aiden's identity, but it also presents this moment of gender choice as an opportunity that families should more fully reflect upon. Julian, and there's a new book called Julian Goes to a Wedding, which I think I have, I don't have that slide up here, but Julian Goes to a Wedding is one where Julian is going to a lesbian wedding. Again, people who, it's distinguishing gender fluidity from transgender identity, from, right, sexual orientation. All separate and different things that your child may need to talk about and want to talk about. They may sort of pile them all on top of each other and get them a little bit confused in their earlier years. Some of us as adults still don't get them kind of confused and mix them up and refer to one when we mean to refer to another. But again, it's a moment for reflection and processing, and a really beautiful space in which to do it. Another thing I wanted to raise is with regard to groups other than your own, you want to make sure that your child has wonderful and beautiful language to describe difference in communities other than his, her, or their own, in order to avoid that child going out and describing people from another community in a hurtful way. So this book's Eyes That Kiss at the Corners is about quote unquote Asian shaped eyes, okay, but eyes that sort of are not as wide or round as eyes in other groups, and talks about beautiful ways to describe those particular features. Okay, and then the last intersectional identity I wanted to talk about is race and religion together. So here we have a young girl who is Muslim, and this book explores the ways in which she is treated in her mixed race community, but one that does not have a significant number of Muslim American families. And so what I like about this book is there are so many of the books about diversity and difference treat difference as something that a child needs to be grateful when people honor his or her difference, or the child needs to be afraid and wait for the moment when social acceptance is given. The little girl in this story is so proud in her identity and so secure with her family that although she experiences a moment of doubt when presented with children who ask questions or who seem to sort of be suggesting there's something weird or strange about her sister's head covering, she ends up pushing back on that and saying, you know what, I'm proud of this. I don't need your acceptance. There are going to be people who are uncomfortable with who I am. I'm still proud of who I am. And I think that's a great thing for kids to see. When books sort of premise the happy ending or the resolution in a story on everyone around, right, celebrating what makes someone different from the rest of the community, they're sort of offering a false representation of the world. Children who are from religious minorities or who are from a culturally different background in some way may repeatedly experience marginalization, exclusion, or stigmatization in some way. And so you want stories that show kids who are able to stand proud in who they are, regardless of the acceptance of those around them. So we see the little girl go from a moment where she's sort of defending her background and her heritage in a way that seems small and almost mouse-like. She's a little afraid. And by the end of the book, she's standing tall and proud without any doubts. Oh, this is Jillian Goes to the Wedding. Okay, so you can see it's a gorgeous, really gorgeous book. A beautiful lesbian wedding again. And here is Julian again, gender fluid. So he's got his flowers in his hair and his purple outfit on. He may even refer to himself as they. It's not clear from the book because it's mostly a picture book, but we get to see, again, these differences is that gender identity is not sexual orientation. All of these things are different. All of them are part of a wonderful and beautiful mosaic.
Yes. You know, this is very interesting. We've had two people wanting the list of the books. So let me just say it again. The Dr. Rich and Dr. Randall will get together and make a list. And if, you know, you have her email that's in the text, and she will email it back, you know, the list of the books to you. So you have the list. Otherwise, you know, some people are writing the books as they're doing the presentation. That's another way. And I know it's overwhelming to write and, you know, listen at the same time, but you can also, you know, you get the book list if you email, because I have books that I would want to add to that list also. So we will get together and make a list for you. So thank you.
Sure.
Are you ready for the next poll question? Let me see what it is before. It's about the white savior. So I don't know. I will get to that poll when you're ready.
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that now. So another thing that literature can do is give you opportunities to talk about social justice issues. But very often when we think about environmental hazards, unfairness in the world, the book will introduce a white character at a late stage of the book, and that character comes in and affects some large change that ends up being the resolution, that ends up being the savior moment, right? where all of the problems are solved by the arrival of either white wealth or white assistance. One of the beautiful things about these two titles is that it shows a problem within a community of color, and the people in that community are responding to that problem and working to solve it. And so they are seen either as the subject of bravery, the hero of the story, or the person with expertise that is coming in to save the day. I thought, Dr. Rose, that maybe you would want to talk about Mama Miti.
Yes, Mama Miti is a great book because my aunt, Wangari Maathai, she's Dr. Wangari Maathai, by the way. I remember when she went to school and got her doctorate, which was many years ago, and I always wanted to be just like her, get my doctorate. And she encouraged me when I was growing up. She says, you must get this. And I was in the United States of America going through school and doing my work life here when she won the Nobel Prize. And it was such an exciting moment. My mother called me and we talked about it and, you know, just saying congratulations to her. But, you know, having that many trees, she just got everybody excited about trees. Even my mother grew trees on her farm and everybody was excited about the trees. So that's about Mama Miti. It's a very dear story to me. My students always, you know, talk about it. She wrote a book that became an international bestseller, you know, a grown-up book about her life and, you know, growing up in a place where the male culture is so dominant. And for her to have done this was literally something that was amazing for all of us women that acknowledge how difficult it is to be in an African country where the males always have preference, you know? So thank you for sharing this book.
Absolutely. The book is just gorgeous in terms of its colors, in terms of just really representing with all the poetic beauty that it can, the experience of being a person who cares about the earth and is committed to planting these trees to replenish a nation. And so it talks about the different kinds of trees, and there's just this wonderful, almost like a call and response type quality to the book, where she goes through these various moments where she's encountering people with problems and they say, Mama Miti, what should I do? What should I do? And she says, go plant a tree, go plant a tree. And she explains how the tree will either provide them with resources for their family, provide shade for their crops, replenish the earth, replenish their very society. So really a wonderful book. Also great that she won the Nobel Prize. She's a source of expertise, but also just a sense of majesty really throughout the book, really wonderful. The Water Princess is about access to water and this young girl who was forced to walk very long stretches for long periods of time to access water for her family. For those families with children who, and I'm sort of laughing because I'm one of them, who sometimes complain a little bit and sometimes don't realize the privilege that they have. This is a great book for showing how hard some children have to work to support just basic family operations, to just provide water for the family, for bathing or eating. And she does this, you know, she both does it without complaint, but also with a sense of the frustration that her community should have access to water, that she should not have to do through this. And again, it shows that people, even in circumstances where they have need, where it isn't a wealthy place, she is still regal, she is still royal, she is the water princess who carries this bucket on her head in order to access water and returns to help her family.
I'm going to release the fifth question, which is the white savior construct.
Absolutely.
So that people can read what white savior construct is all about and do the polling. So there you go. So I know it's a little bit of a heavy reading on this one. Whoops, what did I do with it? Oops, where did it go? Okay, hold on. Okay, there it is, sorry. Everybody can see it. So people we don't have anybody yet voting. So maybe the white construct, the idea that whites must save themselves from their own racism. Is it the white savior construct? Is it the idea that Black people must save white people from racism? Is it C, the idea that Black people should rely on and be grateful to white figures that save them from racism? And D is the white savior construct, the idea that most white people are good and do not harbor racial bias. So you decide what your definition is, what you think white savior, is for you out of these choices. So we have 9 people now. So let's see if we can get at least over 15 before I close the polling. And this whole idea of white savior, if I could comment on it, Dr. Rich.
Sure.
Coming from East Africa myself, we had all these people that came to our country to save us. We must save the Africans, we must save the Kenyans, and they bring in the money and it's their solution, it's their way. They don't even want to listen to some of us who have ideas. I remember my uncles and aunts, I was young, and they would have some ideas and they were never, taken seriously. We must save the Africans. And yes, we're grateful for the money, we're grateful for the things that happen, but you also have to include us and empower us to, come up with our own solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking I'm climbing on the airplane coming to United States of America, and we're not going to see this concept here, because, America is such a great country. But then you come work in the inner city and it's the same kind of white savior mentality. It's even in Hollywood. Every time you see a movie, Glory, the movie that was with the hidden figures, it seems like it was a white person who came to help the Black person, and you start looking at these movies with a critical, analytical eye. And why is these hidden figures, these women were, scientists, they figured out their situation, but it's the white man who comes to help them to even get a bathroom, that she can use the bathroom. When in the real story behind that is that, she's the one who figured out this situation. And when asked, the filmmaker who made the hidden figures, he just said, well, I want white people to do the right thing. They should be, they should do what to help others, and that's not good enough, because it's making any of us feel that we can't solve our problems. Then we don't want children to be learning these things. We want children to learn that they can solve their problems. So in the preschool classroom, in the early childhood classroom, having opportunities, lots of opportunities for children to solve their problems. I don't even tie shoelaces in my little preschool classroom many years ago. I would allow whoever was good at tying the shoelace. And believe me, I had the shoelace with several knots, but I let it be. At least it was tied and it was good. I didn't need to come and be the expert, because I wanted the children to learn that they are also good at what they do and they should solve their problems as much as possible. I'm there to guide, but hey, there are different ways to tie a shoelace. Who said we have to go this way, one way? Okay, so a construct. I tell you, Dr. Rich, this is my pet peeve #1, having come from East Africa and seeing these people bringing money and telling us what to do. So I can talk about it for like 3 hours straight, but let's get back to you.
Sure, let's see the results of our poll just to see.
Yes, let's see the results. I'm ending the poll. We have 18 of the people. Fantastic. And here, share the results. Yes. And here we are, very close, very close with A and C. Would you like to comment on that, Dr. Rich?
Sure. I mean, the way you're going to hear it talked about in most discussions is going to be the answer C, that there are too many representations out there in the world where the story seems to be Black people in trouble, in poverty, in danger, and then either a wealthy white person or just a white person because of their whiteness comes in and saves the day. And so for all the reasons that Dr. Rose mentioned, these representations really are experienced as exhausting by people because it really does not encourage us to see the beautiful ways in which people of color empower themselves and rescue their communities all of the time. But these stories, tend to do well in Hollywood with Hollywood producers because they offer a certain sort of heroic view of whiteness that I think a lot of people think will sell. The problem for us is in terms of our children's identity development and our own sense of pride in our communities, it doesn't do justice to the stories that need to be told about the ways in which people of color are actively working to shape the world. Okay. I'm realizing that the presentation is going to go on to more social justice issues. And so from your question earlier about mixed race identity and titles for folks in mixed race families or mixed race parents who want to talk to their children about racial identity issues, there are some great titles out there. There's one from Taye Diggs, the actor. It's called Mixed Me. And it involves a mixed race child who is very comfortable in all aspects of his identity, but is negotiating a world with which he's always experiencing these intrusive questions or these challenges. And there's another book called I Am Mixed, and it's about a brother and sister who look, quite different from one another, but are from the same family, and explains what they go through in terms of people challenging their connection and questioning their appearance.
Okay, and Dr. Rich, the last question you have on polling is about the Red Summer. Do you want me to go ahead and poll this, or you want to wait and explain?
How about you put it up in like right at the next slide?
Okay.
Here I wanted to pause and say we're in the tail end of Black History Month, and for many of us, most of the Black History Month programming in our children's schools has looked very much like this slide. Independent biographies of singular figures and talking about their wonderful accomplishments, which of course we should absolutely celebrate their accomplishments. But there are ways in which this particular presentation of Black history does a disservice to our communities and to our children. Because these individual figures are presented, it almost seems like Black exceptionalism, that there are these just sort of rare moments where Black people stand out and become historically significant, rather than understanding that the reason that we're focusing on these single examples is because of the institutional racism and the structural barriers that individuals have to overcome in order to achieve. So by focusing on the individuals, right, our attention gets pulled away from the conditions that actually made it so difficult for them to shine and probably held back many other people around them. We are starting to see more and more children's literature, children's books that actually move away from, again, the 51 most inspiring people, where you really can't get a sense of the historical conditions that they faced that caused us to really have to sort of search for the individual one or two people who were able to make it through. We're moving away from that model to a model that actually looks at the historical conditions that made life extremely dangerous and difficult for communities of color. This shift allows us to see the heroism, the bravery, the dignity of just the common man, the common woman, the common person who survived through that period and lived to tell the story. So Dr. Rose, I think you can share the poll about the Red Summer now.
Okay, there we go.
So the second title on this page, again, is an attempt to move away from the single historical figure who's of note to describing a particular historical period, historical incident that has profound resonance for the African-American community. Before I talk about the book, I was curious to see how many people know what the Red Summer is.
We have 7 out of 24. We want to get over 15 before I close the poll, because we want to know what the knowledge of this group is, and it's all anonymous. So put your best answer.
Absolutely. So what was the Red Summer? Was it a period after World War I when wealthy Black towns were burned across the United States, and there were waves of Black, and so for some reason this got cut off, but waves of Black lynching? Okay.
Yeah,
so
it got cut off, but Black lynching. And it's interesting that the lynching law is still to pass, this year. So, I would love you to comment on that. But let me see, we have 18 people, so let's share the results real quick. And here you go. Here are the results.
Okay, great. So that's exactly right. So most people got it right. It's that period after World War I when wealthy Black towns across the United States were burned, and there was a wave of Black lynching. The period of the Red Summer is actually more than a summer. It was a period of about 5 years, between 1917 and 1923, if I have my dates right. And there were 36 towns burned to the ground and destroyed, wealthy Black communities. doing extremely well. And they were destroyed by bands of mostly immigrant whites who were frustrated by Black progress in the area and threatened by it. And so after this period, again, 1,000 people killed during that period, this profound period of racial terror, you can imagine the effect on Black communities and on their relationship to the United States. So the Tulsa Massacre tells the story of one of these towns that's burned to the ground. And some of you might think, wow, this is heavy subject matter for a children's book, and it is. But there are ways in which when we don't tell these stories, again, all the research is telling us that children are developing understandings, meanings, conclusions. They're developing conclusions about the world in the absence of important historical facts. One of the results of the events like the Tulsa Massacre or the Red Summer more generally is that intergenerational wealth has not been able to be passed down within Black communities. So all of the wealth that was generated in this period between 1917 and 1923, you can imagine what the wealth of those communities would look like, and the wealth of the African-American community more broadly would look like if it had been allowed to accumulate from that period until now, 100 years later.
The other thing, sorry, the other thing,
economic marginalization, when we see high rates of homelessness in Black communities, right? It's no accident that these things have developed when you think about the amount of wealth that was destroyed, as well as the terror visited on people who were economically successful and Black. I'm sorry, Dr. Rose, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I thought that the computer was playing some games, but just to add on to that, Dr. Rich, it's so important to understand the effect of trauma. If you lost your wealth during that Red Summer, you'd be fearful to make more wealth. You prefer to stay poor so that you don't get lynched and beaten and terrorized. So it's still in the DNA. You get afraid to make more, to show yourself, or because every time you do, you get beaten back down. Or somebody comes and takes your wealth because they're not willing to work hard or whatever it is they're not willing to do. So, and then people say, how come Black people don't have this and they don't have this and they don't have, well, they've been terrorized when they made that effort to get these things, and it's still there and it still needs to be addressed and healed. So teaching a child these things early so that they know to heal, this has to be healed, so that children can understand it's okay for them to get wealthy. It's okay for them to shine their wonderful talents. And we're seeing this more and more. When I saw Amanda Gorman speak, I was literally in tears during that whole inauguration, that she had stood so tall and embraced all of America, Black, white, Asian, whoever, just the ability for this young person to share this knowledge, this vast wisdom, that we're all in this together, was just, I just didn't know what to say at that point. But unspeakable is what happened. There was a Black Wall Street in Tulsa, and the very, very wealthy Black business owners, the whole place was burnt down. They were known as Black Wall Street because they were able to really help their community. And they became known on Wall Street as a force to be reckoned with. And they were burnt down, all their businesses.
That's absolutely right. And I guess the main thing to emphasize in talking about this book and books that are similar, again, there are more books like this that are coming out, is when kids are told about these historical events, they don't quite seem real. When you hear 36 towns across the United States were burned to the ground, and that the Black people who owned land in these areas and owned the businesses were wealthy, it doesn't really mean anything to you. When you look at this picture book, and it starts off with actual photographs of what that area looked like before it was burned to the ground, and then the last page is a photograph of what it looked like after the mobs were done, it really resonates with you, because in between, you've had an opportunity to really sit with pictures that actually, much of the book is about the happy period when the town was fully functional. It talks about the ice cream parlor where many African-American couples went and they got engaged. It shows you, right? I think it shows one of the places where there were people who had airplanes, right? Who resided in this community. There were movie theaters. They had their own separate school system. It was a fully developed, self-sufficient community that would have been the envy of, you know, any town at that time period. And so the thing about the artwork is, again, you're concerned when they're young about there being too much violence. There's no blood in this book. Instead, it represents the pain in the faces of the people as they're fleeing, in the smoke billows in the air, in the frightened expressions of children, and in the loss as the people are sort of leaving and moving and trying to find a place to go. So it's a really poetic way of describing this. It could even be something as you engage with when you talk to older children about this, because again, when they hear these sort of flat historical facts, they can't really grasp what the meaning is. But I've had, you know, many people come to my, not many people come to my house because it's COVID, but you know what I'm saying? A couple of people who came to my house noticed this book and picked it up and said to me, my God, I never realized what this was, but this is incredible. This is really incredible. So it does provide you with an opportunity to make it more concrete and make it real without scaring or traumatizing because it is too violent. Is it captures the emotion and it captures the injustice without a sort of a pageantry of violence at the same time. Okay.
The thing to note is that, you know, children have seen the violence. I mean, that killing of George Floyd, the children did watch that. They, you know, if we had to tell the truth, many children watched that, Black, white, Asian, whoever. And so you wonder how they process that trauma of seeing that man lose his life on the TV and whether anybody addressed it. So maybe reading a book like this may be the start of that journey of being able to talk about that people do get hurt, and sometimes it's on that level.
Absolutely. They are surrounded by these stories of police brutality now, so much so that you almost lose track of the names. And each one of the stories is just a bit more horrific. So even though we think we're protecting our children from violence, sometimes I say to folks, you don't think they know, but they're walking in at the end of the newscast, or they're reading the paper or the, you know, the internet entry about the violent thing over your shoulder. They know far more than you think they know. And if you don't give them space and time to talk with you about it, then they end up having to process these things on their own. Having talked about trauma, I also want to emphasize that you want to show them Black joy without trauma, or Latinx joy without trauma. So you want to include some books where it's just an incredibly beautiful, wonderful life that's filled with happiness. People are going about their tasks, like getting married, or, you know, maybe painting a mural in the neighborhood. This, my daughter's favorite book. She's not with us today. I thought she might be, but her schedule's very busy, so she was unable to make it. It's called One Day in the Eucalyptus Tree. And it's just about a little African-American boy who is so smart that he tricks a snake into, well, I won't ruin it for you. He outsmarts a snake who's trying to eat him in the jungle. And it's just a rhyming, fun little adventure. Race is not surfaced in that way. The primary character just happens to be Black. And then finally, giving them spaces to imagine possibilities. Some people refer to this as Afrofuturism. Some would just refer it to as this incredibly expansive, imaginative space. A wonderful book called Glory that just came out. It's really a coffee table book. A friend of mine gave it to me and my daughter just could not put it down. It's wonderful, wonderful, beautiful, extraordinary pictures of young Black girls dressed up in a variety of really futuristic costumes that also reckon back to particular historical eras. And they are just combining things in interesting ways and bringing in their cultural heritage, as well as heritages from a variety of different places. It's an incredible, incredible mix. And then these wonderful, fantastic portraits of them are mixed with short biographies that talk about their accomplishments and stress their status as photographers and artists and poets and novelists and social justice warriors. All of them have these identities at an incredibly young age that shows that they're entitled to dignity and respect and are even regal despite their very young years. So in addition to thinking about the imaginary, we also want to be sensitive to maybe some of our vulnerabilities and our issues around family structure. For Black and Latinx families, sometimes it's been a little bit harder to be accorded again, these questions of dignity and respect are just so fundamental to being able to raise a child with healthy self-esteem. And so sometimes I find people are really sort of focused on presenting stories to their children that involve the nuclear family, that show intact families and two-parent homes. And if people are sensitive about these issues, I completely understand that. But there are so many kids in our community who are coming from quote unquote non-traditional families, whatever that means. I think at one point the statistic in the United States was 1 in 2 families would be a divorced family. Of every 2 couples that gets married, one of them gets divorced. There are a lot more blended and single parent homes than there are the sort of traditional nuclear family. So even while it's important for us culturally to be able to represent this beautiful space of the nuclear home, we also want to do things like represent the families that are shown in the Simone Biles biography here. So this book called Flying High charts her family history and talks about the fact that her mom was not in a stable situation. And that talks about the fact that she lived with her grandparents for a period of time as she was growing up. And then talks about her being adopted into a home. Right, so she goes through a variety of different family structures and right, still ends up being a famous gymnast, one of the, many people would say the best gymnast of all time. It's just to show kids that if they're living in more, and again, I hate this terminology, but fragile home situations that don't match up with the nuclear, quote unquote, ideal family, it means nothing. They can still achieve. They're still, you know, part of the American family, the broader American family. And it's important to give them representation and do it in a way that shows that they have nothing to be ashamed of and that these stories are not hidden. Okay, so to sum up, before we move on to Dr. Rose's comments, I just wanted to give you some general guidelines for talking to your kids about race. Early is better than later. Often is far better than single times. Layered conversations. If you think a topic is hard, go at it at a very general level the first time. Keep wrapping back around and adding additional nuance over time as their maturity level and their sophistication increases. Always, always tailor them to the sensitivities and the needs of your child. Don't go by any established rules or metrics in that way. You can tell if your child is not ready for something, and you can gradually introduce them to the idea over time. Don't force yourself to get it exactly right the first time. If you try to get it exactly right the first time, you're just going to be less willing to have these conversations. Sometimes it's helpful for your child to see you wrestling with issues as well, trying to figure things out. So if you're stumbling over terms with regard to transgender kids, be honest with your child and say, I need to get better at this. I'm learning this vocabulary as well. Okay, they really will learn to trust you if they can see that you struggle as well and that you're willing to talk with them and grow with them. In open door atmosphere, nothing's too big or too small. Sometimes you'll have to ask the question 3 or 4 times before you get the answer, but you know that that's true with everything with your kids, right? That sometimes it takes a little time for them to warm up and to come with you. Create a context in which the idea is that you're always solving the problems together and always growing together. And in that way, you can create an open and honest dialogue that will ensure that you hear both about their trials and tribulations, as well as their triumphs. So thank you again for your attention, and I look forward to our conversation. Dr. Rose, I'm going to take this down so we can all see each other. Is that?
Yeah, and that's good. And I was wondering about the storytelling with a child. Were you going to include that? When are you going to include that? Or no, your little one was going to read? Or
oh, like I said, she's not here to do it. So
okay, that's fine. Okay, so this was interesting to me, and I wanted to make sure that we were making sure that we understand some of these main points that Dr. Rich brought up. Favorite books. We all have favorite books. We love, to talk about the old classics. And, some of us, we love Little Red Riding Hood. We love, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. in Cinderella, oh my God, Cinderella was my book of all time. You know, I loved Cinderella's, you know. So the thing is what do we do about old classics like that are problematic? What do we do with a book that was written that George Washington built the White House, you know, when we know that he did not build the White House, okay? And what do we do with those cases when there's a whole book about George and, you know, how he built the White House? And then we have another book. Thank God somebody wrote another book that told the true story that the slaves really did build the White House. So, you know, many people are reading that one book about George building the house. They're not reading the other books. So how do we go about these ideas, especially if you're a teacher and if you're a parent that wants to bring in an anti-racist library into your child's life so that they are brought up with the being anti-racist, let's just say that. And I like to say anti-Black because so many times people are so quick to blame Black people, and this is Black History Month. And I'm always surprised when we take time to listen to other people and feel sorry for them, you know, that, you know, and then when somebody Black is sharing something, automatically it's that person is put in another category. Oh no, we don't want to listen to that person. And these are real, this is what children are observing. This is why I'm bringing it up. You know, you can go to a meeting and, you know, people would just listen to somebody else from a different race, but not listen to a Black person because they're seen as troublemakers or people who are, you know, shouldn't even be talking. And this is not what I want children to get out of this experience. I want children to get out of this experience that we are all the same. People bleed, people, you know, have issues, we cry, and allow people to cry. So how do you raise a child so that they can see that they shouldn't put their head down when a white person comes in the room? They should speak up. When these things are being passed on from generation to generation to generation, and the books are not really much helping, unless you build an anti-racist library for your child, you're going to continue getting those books that have the white savior construct, that has a lot of trauma around Black people, that has stereotypes, you know, and people are saying, oh no, I don't want to bring this to my child right now, it's too violent. And the favorite books that we continue to read, and we don't notice that they are part of the white dominant culture and nothing to do with the Black culture and supporting Black children in the classroom. I literally have to have a teaching with my students, you know, and tell them that Black children are suffering in the classroom because they're getting missed. You know, they're getting missed in the classroom and many of them are falling the cracks. And then we discuss about it. And they say, well, Rose, what about the other children? I say, yes, the other children, we're going to cover every race. But right now I want us to start off with the little Black boys because some of you have been teaching little Black boys. And you see them, you know, they see their Black men being killed on the TV. How are you going to start explaining those issues to the children? Do you see, when they see that and when they're afraid to be the young Black boy, young Black man that they need to be? So these are questions, these are discussions. Feel free to jump in. I'm ready to take the questions. Dr. Rich is ready to take questions. If you have a question, put it in the chat. We want to be able to have a healthy discussion. These are just matters. You can pick something else if it's not on the list here, I mean on the slide, so that we can have a healthy action-oriented solution, maybe sharing how you feel, because Black History Month is not just one event. It is a whole year event. We live with these Black skins. I cannot go pretend to be a white person tomorrow. People are gonna see me Black as soon as I arrive. But, you know, and that's a real thing.
So I'm gonna go ahead and unshare our screen.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually,
since I've set it up, the issues, and people can now talk.
Absolutely. I'm struggling a little bit to get our slide presentation. Yeah. Here we go. Okay, now we can.
Yeah, Cecilia wrote a wonderful comment. Cecilia, why don't you talk out on this and just tell us what your point is about Cinderella?
Talked about classic books or classic stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make a statement that, because I think what we have too much in our culture today is that what we want to do is get rid of something. Instead
Mhm.
of getting rid of it, you don't ban Cinderella. What you do is you explain it, and when it was written. And the real Cinderella, because Disney has taken Cinderella, like many other stories from other cultures and from other places, and created them to be Disneyized, and that's not real. And Disney's done a great job on their own to clean up Disney and to create stories of empowering young girls and showing princesses of other cultures and doing all that, which I think is amazing. Some of the newer Pixar and Disney films are just fabulous. But you read other books, you find other books, not just that Cinderella story, which is very, very short as it is anyway. And you read other books about princesses, and you look at it from other cultures and from other races, and you share that. And the more you share that among all children, because that's really, and this comes right out of our Teaching in a Diverse Society class, you need to always share and expand all of those horizons for all children.
Thank you.
Sometimes they're not going to have that as, quickly at home. So we need to share it across to all children. That's
Thank you.
where my point was. So.
All right, thank you. I saw that in the chat. If there's anybody else, as Linda Cole said, as a parent, it starts with you. Linda, would you like to expand more on that, please?
You are asking the question, where do we start? What do we do? Well, as a parent, you do the best you can. It's each home at a time. So if parents were to do exactly what Dr. Rich has portrayed for all of us in terms of the books, the subjects, as you have done the same thing, Dr. Rose, we as parents have to start with us. Once we're educated about what we need to do, then we grow. We grow with the children. Because we have to understand that what we're teaching our children, we have to examine ourselves. So we're going to be growing with the children, and it's one family at a time. So if we can do that, you'll be surprised it'll make a difference. So we'll be dealing with our own racist or prejudice thoughts, feelings. Why? Because we've been in the world. We know what's going on. And we're fighting against that as well. And now we're teaching our children, check it out. You're teaching your children how to be anti-racist when you have the same feelings. You have these concerns because you know what the world is about. So you're trying to learn, grow, and overcome. And that's the other point I wanted to make. We have to, we can't stay where we were, but we have to recognize where we were and let our children know that they were born for greatness, just like all of the people who have accomplished so much because they overcame. So let's start with we as a parent, one family at a time, or one child, one mother, child, or if it's a single family, if it's a nucleus family. And I just want to say this also. Yes, we have a lot of single parent households, but we got to also talk about the nucleus family as well, because what we're doing is saying, well, we don't have that many nuclear families, but there are a lot of nuclear families around. And we tend to minimize that now. I notice how we're minimizing it, if you understand what I mean. So yes, we have a lot of single families, but why not celebrate those who, the nuclear family, where there is a parent in the home, or, the what do we call the blended families and so forth. Those are families.
Yes.
So let's start with us. And let's recognize what we're thinking and what we're feeling when and hopefully we are growing when we're talking with our children about these issues.
Thank you so much.
We are growing, okay?
Thank you so much. And what Dr. Cole has said is very, very important, because a lot of times the media will just give one side of Black people They don't
Absolutely.
really give the complete side. So there's all the single mamas, and that's it. Most Black people are like this. Most Black, and it gets me sick because they're not really looking at Black people as a whole, as an integrated whole. They're just focusing on one little thing and then blowing it out, to a big mountain, from a molehill to a big mountain.
Absolutely.
And it seems like what Michael Hopper is saying in the chat, our societal conditioning and indoctrination of treating Black people as inferior. So now we have immigrant groups that come in, and because of this indoctrination, they start treating us the same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's so unacceptable. It's like, hello, stop doing this. Research on Black people, and you find that we are very proud people. We come from kings and queens. There are kings and queens in East Africa, in Uganda primarily. They're Bugandan tribe. They have royalty. You go to Nigeria, they have royalty. Their royalty in Egypt, the royalty in Uganda, the royalty in West Africa. Nobody wants to talk about that. The only royalty we're going to recognize is that of Europe. And it's a crime. It's a crime against Black people to be putting them in segregated compartments. And so I want to stop speaking about this, because this is, the royalty thing gets me excited. We'll talk to Michael Hopper. And Michael, please take it over. I'm passing the baton to you.
Well, one thing I wanted to add, which I do appreciate Dr. Cole and Ms. Vega talking about, is learning together. And I think that's exciting in regards to, because we all have, having to unlearn a lot of things that we've learned and been conditioned and programmed and trained in American society. So, like, for instance, I'm really interested in finding out who the real Cinderella is. I'm like, with Cecilia, I'm like, there's another Cinderella. There's another Cinderella. So, with my nephew, my little nephew and niece, and I'm about to be an uncle for hopefully twins. My brother's having 2 boys. That's in the process now. So even though my wife and I don't have biological children, being there for other people's children and being an example, but I know there's stuff I have to deal with, and I like where we're coming from. It starts first at home. It starts first with
you.
And yeah, just there's another Cinderella, so just. Yeah, and that's kind of fun, learning, unlearning, but learning at the same time what's real with our children, because his story has been based on his story, not real story, but it's okay to go there. And I think that's what the times are calling for, that kind of reckoning where what's real, and let's really address what's so we can move forward in healing from past wounds and current wounds, so we can go forward together. Yeah, no, there's a real Cinderella. Wow.
Yeah, thank you. Miss Vega really aced that with the Cinderella issue, because little girls want to be Cinderella. And I'm reminded of a story of a little Black girl that wanted to be a ballerina, and she was told she couldn't be a ballerina. And it is a children's book, and it's worth picking up, because the little Black girl was like, I can be a ballerina. And, I think it's Debbie, she's a famous producer. And
Debbie Allen.
Debbie Allen. Yeah, she wrote that book. And I think some of it was true from her world. So, Dr. Rich, I know you have some comments that you want to make, some closing comments. I really like this idea of creating an anti-racist library for your child. Where do we start? With 1 book, 4 books, 5 books? The money is not, and the library system is not working that well, by the way, with COVID. So if I was a young parent today and I have a young child, how would you recommend I go about this?
Sure. I don't know if I should be the voice that is the closeout for this, because I think our participants have just brought so much to the conversation in terms of the generative space of the family and learning together and growing together. I just hope that we remain focused on that as the primary takeaway, that vulnerability, that honesty, that engagement.
Absolutely.
It's just, you know, your whole theme is, right, the Black family. And so we should end on that note. I guess what I will say is, right, even in this Zoom session, I can feel that the members of this community are a family, different family of sorts, and that you can share resources among each other. So if I were trying to conserve my dollars and also trying to build my connections in my community, I'm circle, so that, you know, I buy the 4 titles, but by the time those titles get to the next family, we're not just handing those books over, we're sharing those books together, we're talking about those books together, and then they go on to the next family. And so you create a network of folks. You could even keep a list in the back of the book of the families that have held that book in their hands and that have enjoyed that book together, to really just keep that feeling of community spirit going. And so it doesn't just become, you know, one person sitting trying to figure it out on Amazon. But you can, especially when issues are showing up in your community over and over again, it's important to invest in those books and to share them with each other and to keep dialoguing and talking. They say it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a library, and that village and that library should be connected.
We are going to be talking to our librarians, Ms. Vega, as soon as we get off next week, you know, just talk to and see if they have some of the books so that the students can borrow these. And, well, they don't, but maybe, you know, they're always asking us what books they should purchase for us. So I definitely
start
think
doing it. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's a way. David Azias, you are the person who does the PR and the marketing for our group, you know, and I just wanted to find out from you what your ahas were from this conversation we've had with Dr. Rich, you know, what you see that we can do as a college community, because I know you're involved with a lot of things that the new president is doing for us. Actually, she's a year old. So what can you tell us about your ahas at this moment?
Well, personally, I'm going to have, you know, God willing, I'm going to have 2 grandchildren, my first grandchildren in August.
Oh, wow.
So I got to get ready for that big time. You know, I will say, since I am of a certain age, that, you know, there were some books that were put in front of us, like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer and things like that, that, you know, you have to go back and reread them, especially as an adult, to make sure that, you know, the viewpoint is understandable, you know, for young people. And, but as far as, you know, the campus goes, I just want to, you know, I just hope that we model for each other, you know, that we are in that day-to-day routine, you know, that day-to-day walk, that's what our students are looking at and trying to take in, that, you know, we're there for everybody, and that, you know, everybody has their own story. So we need to tie into that. But, you know, that's just been something that I've tried to make sure that every student was valued. And, you know, we got how many thousands of them, so it's hard. But I know you guys are doing some miracles in the classroom, because I hear the stories on the social media, and, you know, where they're a little more open, a little more personal, and they are very happy with some of the experience that they've had. Yeah, there's challenges, especially right now, but, you know, you need to keep doing that. You need to keep modeling and doing it every day. So that would be my takeaway. I think we've got a great president who understands that and will promote that. So, you know, I'm looking forward.
I'm excited, David, how you're going to be uniting Black and Brown and putting a lot of the pictures that we're in this together on the website, because people go into that website just to show that we are all here embracing everybody, the lesbian, queer, you know, whatever, you know, the LB. I can't remember all the alphabet right now. I'm so tired. But yes, but just that full embracing and making sure that the ASO is empowered, you know, with that, because images really matter, you know, and what we constantly see images that sometimes are not good for our race, for Black people, because we're always in trouble. It's always that pained look. I used to get upset with National Geographic and wrote to them a couple of times to say, stop putting these pictures of Africans. This is not true, but they're National Geographic. So I ended up having to keep my mouth shut. But, you know, it's just like, these are not the true pictures of Africans. You're showing us with spears in our hands. And, you know, this is just not true. You know, it's just like the Native American Indians, you know, how they display them. There are lots of very many successful Native American Indians.
Absolutely.
But they are there living in reservations and I don't know what else. You know, we've got to get out of that stereotyping. And so the more we can talk about it, I'm very excited, and I'd say this to David because he's part of the top administration of the college. He meets with the president on a regular basis. Very excited about the social climate and being able to talk to each other about what things hurt us and wanting our colleagues to treat us better. I think we need to speak up and we need to say, it's not okay for you to see me this way. I want you to see me this way. And the other concept of intersectionality, where I'm not just a Black woman, I'm also a woman, I'm also an artist, I'm also identify what all the groups identify with. I'm a foodie, big time foodie. That's why I was there yesterday, you know, learning about this, you know, the collard greens and that healthy meal that they made. I can't get it out of my mind right now. But the point is that we all are different and we want to see how we can connect with each other. I connect with all the women on this call. I connect with the men because we all bleed and I love soccer, you know, all the soccer people. So we find the many ways we can connect. And if we continue doing that, then it's not just race centered, it's centered on many other things that make a person up. So, and that's what we want to teach children at the end of the day, you know, that they belong to many groups. We're multidimensional, not just one-dimensional.
Very good.
So, if anybody has anything more to say, please say it now because we want to go and relax with the music that we have for you. Ooh, do we have some music? You know, but Linda, I know that, do we have some music that we set up, Aisha? I know you were going to bring in some music.
Well, Aisha, well, we decided to just not have the music. And,
oh, my Lord. No Sister Sledge, no Supremes.
No Supremes. I can sing for you though. No, I'm only kidding. No, we decided not to because we wanted just to end on, you know, to be filled with all of that has taken place, especially with Dr. Rich's presentation.
Wow.
And of course, with your facilitation. And I think that in and of itself is music in and of itself.
Thank you. And just to say this, I know we're closing. If anybody has a burning question, put it now because we're coming to 5:44 and the end of this program is, you know, we want to thank Dr. Rich for her presentation. Thank each one of you for all your contribution in the polls. We got some really good feedback. We want to thank Dr. Randall, who put this together with Dr. Cole. And it was a fun time for us to just meet with each other and talk frankly about these issues. As you know, especially if you have seen the Henry Louis Gates PBS special on the Black church, that prayers are foundational in the Black community. So now we are going to have Dr. Linda Cole, chaplain of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, to close us out in prayer. So Dr. Cole.
Yes, absolutely. So we can just give a moment and we can, those that want to bow and those that don't. But anyway, I just want to thank our Father. Father, we just want to thank you for an evening of conversation about those issues that concern your children, that burn in our hearts, that we want to make a difference. And we can do that with our children, but also we know that it starts with us as adults. So Lord, thank you for this time that you brought us together. The word says how good, how sweet it is when brethren unite together. And that's what we did today. We gathered around an issue that concerns each and every one of us. So bless those who appeared, who showed up today. They came because they had a concern. They want to be supportive. They want to be a part of the change in our society, in our homes, first of all, and then of course, in this life. We ask that you perfect those things that concern each home. Bless each home. Complete the good work that you began in each person here. And those who have concerns about their health, their family members, that includes COVID or anything that plagues their bodies. We know that you, Father, are the true healer. And we thank you for what you have done, what you will do in Dr. Rich's life, Dr. Rose's life, and every person who showed up here. Complete the good work. There is a good work in each and every one of us. You have given us gifts and talents, and we're asking you to bless those gifts and talents, that they will be fulfilled. Thank you once again. In the name of our Lord Jesus. And those who can agree will say amen. And those who are in agreement with the fact that we united together can say amen. So thank you, Lord. Bless each family, keep them safe, especially from COVID. But even more so, let us know that faith, hope, and love are so important. But the greatest of all is love. Thank you, each and every one of you, for coming tonight. Thank you for sharing again, Dr. Rich, Dr. Rose, and all of those who participated. And if you have children, let them know that there is no greater love than the love of God. Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cole. A great prayer. A lot of people were busy in the chat saying, I want the book list. And I kept reminding them that, the book list, please email Dr. Randall. We have no other way for you guys to contact us except through Dr. Randall. And if you get her email, you can, gently remind her. We exhausted. It is, I can't wait for Friday. I'm going to put on my own Sister Sledge, but I just really want to acknowledge you for that beautiful prayer and how you have brought all of us, to the real reality that we are all people, and we, God expects us to love each other and get along with each other. Bottom line, Black, white, Asian, and what have you. True Christianity means us getting along.
Absolutely.
It isn't what some people are purporting Christianity to be, carrying white flags and marching. That is not true Christianity. I don't care if they're Bible, people. That is not true Christianity. True Christianity is embracing everybody. We are a global community. And,
it doesn't matter.
It's made up of a lot of religions, a lot of cultures, everything.
Absolutely.
Yes.
God is love. Just
Yes.
remember that.
Yes.
God is love.
Thank you, Dr. Rich. Thank you for being with us. We send
Thank
love
you, Dr. Rich.
to our USC family that is next door. Tell us we care about them and we love them and we want them to be part of us in any way they can be. Thank you.
The same goes from us too. Thank you everyone really for just making this a wonderful community moment, a really inclusive one. I hope that you all felt represented and affirmed and saw yourselves in the presentation and took something away from it. But I took something away from your energy and your insights, and it was just a joy to spend this Friday with you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
God bless
Bye-bye.
you.
God
now
bless
enjoy
you.
the rest of your evening. Enjoy
Yes,
it.
Linda Cole and Dr. Randall, please, I need to talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
And please stay. And the rest of you, a beautiful Friday.
Oh, beautiful Friday.
Mhm. Bye, Cecilia. Thank you.
Dr.
Bye,
Rose.
Sonia. We'll talk
Bye,
soon.
Miss Jamil.
Yeah.
I loved your
Dr.
comments,
Rose.
Miss Jamil.
Yes.
I loved your
Yes,
comments.
thank you.
Dr.
And
Rose.
yes,
I zoomed in late and there was one screen where I could register, but how do should I contact Dr. Randall for
Yes.
getting on the list? I made a comment, but I noticed it said me. I'm Stella
Okay.
Podium up here, by the way.
okay.
All
Stella,
right. It
I'm
was
so
wonderful.
sorry about that. There's so much going on. We had the
No.
discipline day. We had a
This
lot of
was
things.
This was wonderful. I parent my great granddaughter. She's 9 years old.
Mhm.
And so the books and everything that I heard when I did come in was so timely. And anyway, I won't go on and on. I know you guys have to go, but what I heard, I loved, and I will follow up with Dr. Randall. She's in
Yeah.
Dr. Randall's Girl Scout troop.
Good, good. Follow up. Dr. Randall is our pivotal point right now. I'm
Yes,
gonna put my
she is.
name there, but I know that she can get the list and work with Dr. Rich to make sure we have those books.
Okay, I know she will.
Yeah.
Goodbye. You guys have a wonderful,
Thank you.
blessed weekend.
God bless you.
God bless
Thank
you
you
guys.
too.
Bye-bye.